Hello, good afternoon, or good evening, depending whether you're watching us live or you're watching a recording, and also depending on your time zone. We're on for a new edition of our weekly show. Today we have, as we usually do on Tuesdays, we have interesting topic to address, and has to do with screen time. Very hot topic for most parents. For those of you who don't know, my name is Tito de Morais. I'm based in Portugal, and I run an internet safety project since 2003. It's called Kids Safe on the Net. It translates it into Kids Safe on the Net, and I also work on the advisory board of Portugal's Safer Safety Center, and on the board of International Advisors for Cyber Safety India. I also advise the Portuguese team of the UK project, and have collaborated with Net Children Go Mobile Portuguese team as well. And I was an external evaluator of cyber training, taking action against cyberbullying, a project that produced a train the trainer manual on cyberbullying. And I also represent Stop Cyberbullying in Portugal, and also Cyber Safety Org in Portugal. We are partners with Google and Facebook on both of their safety centers. And I personally am a member of the International Bullying Prevention Association, and also of the Cyber Safety Standards Task Force. I'm also the author of a book called Cyberbullying, a Guide for Parents and Educators, that was published. I'm the co-author of that book that was published in Portugal in 2016. So I'm speaking from Portugal. So feel free to leave your comments and let us know where you're following the show from, where you are based, and also to use the comments to ask questions so, as I was saying, today we're going to talk about screen time, a very hot topic. And the title for today's session is How to Turn Screen Time into Family Time. And using insights from his book and messaging platform, during this session, our guest will provide insights into the difference between positive screen time and becoming screen captured, thus helping parents make technology a more positive force in their families. With us, we have our guest, Sean Herman. Hi, Sean, and welcome to the show. And I would start to ask, introduce yourself, who you are, and what you do.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Tito, and thanks a lot for having me. So my name is Sean Herman. I'm located in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. And I got into the screen time discussion about 2 years ago. I founded a company called Kinzoo, and that came about after recognizing, or I guess having a lack of comfort with the existing tool sets for children after some of my daughter's early experiences with technology. So I ended up founding the company, and we're building products for families with Kinzoo. And in the early days of the company, we were starting to design our products. And in doing so, I dove deep into this concept of screen time, and I did a lot of reading and a lot of research into it. And what I ended up learning was really interesting, and it started to kind of break screen time down and simplify it within our own household. So I never really set out to write a book, but basically at the end of all that research, I looked at the material and I thought it was something other parents could be interested in. So I set off in the process of writing a book. The book became Screen Captured, and it was released in September of this year. And basically in the book, I'm trying to break screen time down for families, simplify it for parents, and make it less of a anxiety-inducing element in the household. And also I'm trying to arm parents to have better conversations with their kids about technology.
Okay, very interesting. In fact, that's one of the issues that usually parents complain is that their children spend too much time glued to their screens. And let us be honest, many parents also spend too much time glued to their screen. So they most of the times, many times, they don't set the right examples for their children either. But let me congratulate you because I was looking at Kinzoo website and I read a new messenger that turns screen time into family time. This is a really big, tall order, isn't it? I mean, it's quite a task, you know. And I was looking back and looking even at other technologies, you know, for instance, TV. And usually, when a family is around a TV, that's not really family time because they are looking at their attention is focused on the TV screen. So they might be in the same space, but they are not really together. You know, and that with computers and laptops and tablets and smartphones, it's even more so. You know, the web is filled with images of families that are together in the same room, but each one holding their own device. So I was really wondering uh, how, and I was looking into my personal experience as well, and I was looking, okay, when can do I remember a situation in which a screen brought the family together? And I think that the only situation in which I think that happened is in geocaching, because on geocaching you take a GPS device or your cell phone and you go into scavenger hunt, and that brings the family together. The screen is secondary, you know, becomes secondary. So it got me really curious to see how do you propose to turn screen time into family time, because that's a really tall order.
Yeah, it is. And for Kinzoo, we have, admittedly, we have a big vision where you touched on a number of things there, but I think one of the things that I'd like to hone in on is, you know, there's a lot of negative narrative out there around screens and screen time. And not a week goes by that I think we as parents, and I'm a father of two, aren't reading headlines that are tend to be a little, you know, sensationalist maybe in nature and you know, sometimes clickbaity. But there's a lot of studies being done on the art of screen time, and then typically, you know, we're seeing headlines, fairly negative headlines at that, coming off of those studies. So we're constantly exposed to that. But I'm one, and really a foundation of Kinzoo is that I believe there's a lot of upside that technology has to offer, but we're currently at a place where I don't think we're maximizing the potential that it has to offer. So when we talk about bringing, turning screen time into family time, I can point to an example of, I think technology shines in certain aspects, and one of those is connection between people. So when I'm talking about turning screen time into family time, I can point to an example and say that my daughter has never been closer with her grandmother, who lives a province away, and basically is, you know, a 12-hour drive away from us. But technology has enabled her to have conversations with her. They use FaceTime. They use Kinzoo Messenger. We're in a test version right now, but they're using Kinzoo Messenger to message each other. And what it's also done is given them a much more direct relationship, where instead of everything filtering through my wife or myself and passing messages between the two, they now have a very much a very direct relationship. And as a result, they've never been closer. I could also point to my brother, who also lives far away, and he comes to town every now and then he and my daughter have a great relationship, and they play around for a few days, and they joke around and have a lot of fun. And then he goes away, and he might not be back for 6 months. And what technology has done in Kinzoo Messenger is, again, similar to the grandparents, has given them a very direct relationship. And now maybe they're not talking every day, but they have an ongoing relationship, and he's become much more than just that that guy that comes into town every once in a while. So when I look at screen time, I tend to be optimistic. I think that there's a lot of opportunity to kind of strip away some of the negative elements, because it does introduce unique risks that have not been here before, and that things like TV didn't bring. But I tend to look at the upside of TV and actually get quite excited about that. But what we're trying to do is, why Kinzoo exists, is I felt like the existing tool set wasn't that good, and it didn't maybe necessarily have the true interests of families and kids at heart. So when I discovered that, then basically that led to starting the company. And what we're really trying to do is build things for the, from the ground up to meet the modern needs of families.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I myself come from a family that is geographically scattered. We are 6 brothers, 3 of them living in Sweden, another one living in the UK, and 2 living in Portugal. And then we go into their children, and I have nephews in Chile, in the US, in the UK. I have cousins in Africa, and for me, the internet brought me that, brought my family closer together, because before the internet, we had to do international phone calls that costed a fortune. Quality of sound was not very good, and they were incredibly expensive. So keeping in touch with the family, I remember my sister, she married very early. She was 16 when she married and left home, and I would speak like 3 times a year with her, because I was living in Mozambique and she had married a British guy, so the internet actually bring us together. So what you've just said really struck a chord with me, and in the sense, and I see that, for instance, not with my mother, because she lives close by, but my mother-in-law and her granddaughters that live away. Even if my mother-in-law doesn't know how to use the computer, she loves to use Skype, for instance, to speak with the granddaughters. So I perfectly understand that is actually family timing, bringing family closer together. But that's something that also other sort of apps can do. How do you differentiate from WhatsApp, from FaceTime or other messaging apps, or even, for instance, from Facebook Messenger that they launched recently, Messenger Kids, and it was a big noise around it on the safety issues and things like that?
Sure. So I'll address, there's 2 kind of core types of technology that are connecting people. So the first would be video calling and similar. So there we're talking about FaceTime, we're talking about Skype. I would say we don't compete directly with those. The nature of Kinzoo is that it's asynchronous communication, meaning with people spread out and in various time zones and things like that, it can be hard to schedule calls. Yeah. So the idea behind Kinzoo as a messenger, of course, is you can drop messages in at any time, and people can pick them up and respond as they can. So I think that we would complement things like FaceTime and Skype more so than look to replace. I think that that's a good use of technology as well. And in talking to some of the early people that are using Kinzoo, video calling is something that comes up quite often. So it could be something that ends up on our product roadmap, but it's nothing imminent. So that's the first part of it. And then the second part is kind of what you talked about. And what I think has happened is a lot of people are recognizing the need for this type of communication. And what I talked about earlier in, my daughter never being closer to her grandmother. And I think what's happened is people have been looking for solutions. And part of what the book gets into as well is I'm concerned that a lot of people have made their way onto platforms that were never designed for kids. And the other aspects, so you talked about why not use WhatsApp, why not use Facebook Messenger or Messenger for Kids. And there are actually two family messengers that I'm aware of right now in the market. One is coming to market, and that's Kinzoo. One is Facebook Messenger and Messenger for Kids. Where we're different is just fundamentally we're not owned by Facebook. We have a very different business model. And Facebook, I have no particular beef with, but I do argue that their business model just doesn't work for kids. And the other aspect of Facebook and them launching Messenger for Kids has been, it's very difficult. They've taken a platform in Facebook Messenger and Facebook, which is designed to grow as much as possible, to have as many people on it. And part of that is introducing things like the like button and other things to keep people engaged on the platform. What I would argue is it's very difficult to take this mechanism, this foundation that's built for maximum growth and engagement, and then retrofit it back to something for children where privacy and security need to be first and foremost, in my opinion. So we've already seen a few loopholes exposed because of that. And in Facebook Messenger for Kids, when kids were creating groups, for instance, they were able to connect with strangers, which was just a loophole in the design. And my argument is it makes sense because they're scaling back something that's meant to maximize growth. So I think that opens up a lot of challenges. So basically, yeah, our most direct competitor is Facebook Messenger, Messenger for Kids. We're the platform that isn't owned by Facebook, and I think we have different goals. And we also have the advantage of building our platform from the ground up. And we started with these kind of workflows central and first answered the question, how do we keep it secure and private? And yes, we want to grow, but we're not going to grow at the expense of those things.
Okay. From what you were saying, I detect, and also from the title of your book, that you did some quite research into what now is being called the dark patterns and the types of functionalities that apps and devices have developed to keep us using them for extended periods of time. And that's what you were mentioning on what the Facebook business model is based on. That the more we are on the platform, the more advertising we see, the more data collection happens. And I saw that you are compliant with COPA, and my question is: do you have any plans on also being compliant with GDPR, which is the General Data Regulation Protection Regulation that has been approved in the EU?
Yes, absolutely. So we started with COPA because we're going to launch in Canada, which actually doesn't have any regulation necessarily. So we kind of default to what's in the US, which is COPA. So Kinzoo is going to first launch in Canada and the US. So that's COPA compliance was the first thing that we wanted to do. And that was something else that I didn't touch on as well with the question on why use us over something like WhatsApp is a product like WhatsApp, per its terms of use, is meant for 13 plus. And because when you put kids on it, there's no protections in place when they're on WhatsApp to keep their data private and safe. So that's another reason why I don't think that we compete necessarily head to head with WhatsApp. But on the GDPR and the GDPR-K side, yes, we've been busy just putting the final touches on the product, and we're currently testing it with around 100 families to get initial feedback and make sure that what we've built is making sense and we're building the best possible product. GDPR and GDPR-K are imminent after that, so I think it becomes a very early, late 2019 or early 2020 that we're going to work with our partner in compliance, a company called KidSafe out of the US, and we'll work with them on GDPR and GDPR-K compliance. From what I understand, we're very much close. We're pretty much in the certification. We also design things kind of knowing long term that we wanted to adhere to, I think, the most strict standard that there is, which I think is GDPR. And so when we set out and designed Kinzoo, we had that in mind. So we've already put a lot of the things in place, some of those subtleties between that are covered by GDPR that maybe aren't covered as well by COPPA.
Okay. One of the things that, as I was looking at the Kinzoo website, couldn't really understand is how, parents add the contacts and approve the contacts that their kids can interact with. But how do we find contacts on Kinzoo? Because from what I read, they're not searchable. There's some magic codes that come in, and I didn't quite understood what the magic codes were for.
Sure. Yeah. So it's a good example of very purposeful design on our part, and I think a good example of something that, if we wanted to maximize the growth of Kinzoo, we would have used real names or usernames and just let people search and let kids try to friend as many people as they wanted to. We didn't want to go that route. So what we ended up doing is a magic code system, which is every contact, or you can also build a group of contacts of your entire family, ends up with a unique code. It's a 3-word code. And what we end up doing is you'll share that code. So if parents or adults are sharing the code, what they're going to do is share it via text or email. And the idea there is generally parents are going to connect with one another, or they're going to connect, more likely they'll connect entire families. So one family can share their secret code with another family who would input that code, and then it goes through kind of one final approval where parents on both sides have to approve the connection. So that's where it happens kind of at the parent level. And at the child level, secondary to families, is we definitely do see kids wanting to connect with close friends on Kinzoo. And it's a matter of them having to know and share their code. And that can happen one way or the other. And then the kid that receives the code would input it, and then it goes to parents on both sides to approve the connection. So it might be something that's easier to kind of show once the product is out, but it is an example of some way that we thought long and hard about this. And in designing Kinzoo, we went through kind of worst case scenarios, and what keeps me up at night is any possibility of kids connecting with strangers, or having loose or loopholes in the way that kids connect, and then ending up being able to connect with strangers. So it's a good example of something that from a design perspective, designed in the way, and I make all decisions, and we do collectively here at Kinzoo, first as a parent. Like, I'm a parent of 2, and I ask myself, how do I feel about this as a parent? And that felt like the right thing to do. So even if it's going to stunt growth potentially, what we're doing is playing the long game and thinking that over time we're going to grow, but we're not going to loosen that up just for immediate benefit of quick growth, if it means that safety could be compromised.
Okay. So to see if I understand, each user has a magic, and each group has a magic code. So a kid has a magic code, a father has a magic code, a mother has a magic code, grandpa also has one, and our family group also has one. Is that it?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's correct.
Okay. And I guess there's always the risk of fake identities. Somebody posing as a friend and saying, "Well, I'll send you a request and you forward it to your father." But then it has to happen outside, from what I understood, and the risk then will be brought into the application. It's not a problem of the application; it's a problem if the kid has relations with strangers outside the application, right?
Yeah, I would say, as much as I would love to say, we've eliminated any chance of that sort of thing happening, I think the reality is it's virtually impossible to kind of stop,
Yeah.
stop all of those worst case scenarios. What I would say is we spent painstaking hours really running through all of these scenarios and coming up with designs that we thought and workflows that support them, that put enough checks and balances in place that a lot would have to go wrong up front for the connection to be made. But also we've invested in some tools that are more monitoring in nature. So giving parents ways that they can also monitor once people are connected and make sure that there's nothing, nothing inappropriate going on within the platform. So part of the argument I make is, I think that parents need to lean into technology. I think it has a lot to offer. But what's a little bit unique about Kinzoo is it's a platform that's shared between adults and children and parents and kids. And because it's shared, it does open up some new possibilities for us to give better tools to parents, but also it's less about, I download the app, let my daughter on it, and then look over her shoulder once in a while. The idea behind Kinzoo is it's going to be very much an interactive experience, and many members of the family are going to be in there often and having chats. And the expectation is parents are going to have an active role. And also, I think that's, as much as we'd like to put it on regulators or put it on the people building apps all the time, it is part of the responsibility as a parent to, stay on top of these sort of things and make sure platforms are safe. But that being said, we're doing as much as we can, and we've done a lot already in design, and we're going to keep looking for and engaging with parents and finding new ways of delivering tools to them to make it safer.
Okay. One of the things, does Kinzoo include the possibility of sharing videos, for instance? Because usually that's something that kids really enjoy, is sharing videos with family, and even recording their own videos, singing, dancing, or doing other activities that usually the family also likes to and enjoys to see. Is that also a feature that's included?
It is. So the message sets that we support right now are photos, video, text, emoji / kind of sticker, and then audio messages. And what we're trying to do is span, a wide range of ages. So if we have 5 and 6 year olds getting onto Kinzoo, it's more likely maybe they're using audio messages instead of text. But again, that opens up an environment where now they can learn to spell words and they can communicate with family and do it in a very interactive way. So you're right, video is a great medium. Children we know they love watching videos. I argue, and I hope that we can give them tools to enjoy making them, because we often talk about another type of balance. There is, time that you spend on screen versus off screen, but also when kids are using screens, there's a balance there between creating things and just consuming things. And a lot of children today are just consuming, right? And YouTube is kind of the number one platform that they're doing that. So I've come home many times to my daughter, she's kind of glossed over in the face and watching video after video on YouTube. I would feel much better if she was being creative and using a tool set and actually creating her own videos and then sharing them with family. So we're investing in tools that what we say is we like to invest in things that are going to make interactions happen that wouldn't necessarily otherwise happen. So that could be a video. It could be some other things that we're thinking of. We are going to be rolling out a tool where kids are going to be able to draw pictures and make artwork and share that artwork in the family. We're going to have small games where people can play games in an asynchronous way with somebody else in the family. And those are all things that we're trying to kind of get that balance in check, where kids are doing much more than just staring at the screen. We're trying to find ways to make it a little more fun and engaging for the kids, but also B, just have them being creative, learning new things, just doing more than consuming video all day long.
So basically, is become creators also, not just consumers, and using the technologies to express their creativity and to develop their creativity. That I find great. Does it also have the possibility, for instance, of playing games with grandpa or grandmother? And other sort of activity? What sort of activities are you envisioning to have on the platform?
Yeah, I think that we have a lot of ideas, and we measure them against, does it promote creativity and learning? Is it asynchronous? So is it something that you don't have to be there at the same time?
Right.
And C, is it, again, making interactions happen that maybe otherwise wouldn't, right? So what's interesting is the thing about a messenger for children is a messenger for adults can be quite transactional in nature. So when my wife messages me, it might be to pick up milk on my way home from the store, right? With kids, they don't have that same kind of need, right? So what we're looking to do is invest in things that are going to have children kicking off interactions, doing things that are, again, creative, coming up with new ideas and sharing, and in a way to kind of engage the whole family. And when, again, technology, I think, can really shine by bringing people together and opening up new areas and types of exploration for kids. So we're going to launch with at least one game that's going to be a drawing-based game that people can play from far apart. And what we're really looking to do, and what I'm most excited about for Kinzoo also, is building community around it and getting a lot of parents enrolled, so that, because what I'm hoping to get to is that community is going to tell us what we should do next, because we have to make decisions on whether we continue to invest in new safety features, if people are more interested in games or the creative elements and things like that. So I look forward to, I think we've built an amazing foundation, and then I'm really looking forward to just enrolling parents, and they can tell us where we need to go next.
Okay. And we have with us António João Silva. António João Silva is a regular on our shows, and he says good night. And another regular is Abílio Carvalho, who also doesn't miss almost a single show. And he's asking a good question. Good night from Gaia. Gaia is a small city neighboring Porto, where I live in Portugal. And he's asking, is the Kinzoo platform free of advertising?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, there will never be behavioral advertising in Kinzoo. So what I mean by behavioral advertising in Kinzoo, anything algorithmically based, anything that relies on data capture and then serving up the right kind of advertisements for the user, Kinzoo will never do that. So when it comes to business model, there's two things that we're never going to do: is behavioral advertising and selling data to third parties. So those are off the table. When it comes to the term advertising, the only way I shy away is I do see good opportunities to work with other leading brands that share similar values to us. And we'll have an immersive experience that includes families. And I think that looking at ways to potentially partner with brands that share our values, and potentially them having some presence on Kinzoo, could be on the horizon. but it won't be in the form of, every third post in a feed is an ad, and it certainly won't be based on any data tracking. So when we say no advertising, what I mean is no behavioral advertising. I just want to make sure there could be, potentially brand presence in Kinzoo, but again, we're going to weigh those individually. Because the fact is, there is a business side of the app, and I want Kinzoo to be around for generations for parents. So we are thinking about things like business model and how we're going to build a platform that can be around for a long time.
Okay. That question is really relevant because one of the questions that when it comes to applications and things that are directed at children is that in many countries advertising to children is forbidden. I don't know the situation in Canada and in the US, but in Portugal there are some limitations, and I believe in many countries there are also limitations when it comes to advertising to children. So that's a relevant question. But you have also, from what I saw on the website, an advisory board, and does that include also people that have backgrounds on legalities of that sort of thing, not only the legal aspect but also the ethical aspects, and also the impacts that sort of thing can have? For instance, when you say that share the same values that we do, that's a broad statement that I mean, can we put a fast food company within that bracket, and that has impact on children's health and stuff like that? So that's something that it's really something that usually parents are concerned about. And do you get advice from your advisory board for things like that on the way?
Yeah, I do. So we formed an advisory board, and the advisory board represents, I've got an ex-police officer that dealt with internet safety. He's now a keynote speaker. So what he does is goes to schools across Canada and the US and delivers presentations about digital literacy to parents and kids. Last year, he presented to more than 450,000 students. And so I lean on him quite heavily. He's got he'll take things from a legal point of view, but also he's got a very practical approach. And so I lean on him, and he gives me a lot of advice. I've got a leading child psychologist who's based out of New York that sits on my advisory board as well. And we talk often about what are some of the challenges, what are some of the things that are maybe unwritten. And that could be from a design perspective, but also, your fast food question is a good example of where I would lean and get some advice and things like that. And then other members of the advisory board, one that's not named on there, but it's a company that we partnered with, is called KidSafe. And KidSafe, in conjunction with us and the research that we do, is yes, we have to understand the local advertising laws and all of that sort of thing. So yes, it's something we stay on top of. And just to back up, it's when I talk about behavioral advertising there, we're talking about things that are coming from algorithms and driven by algorithms, and they're going to, every time that we visit a platform, they're going to keep track of kind of what we do on the platform, and then they're going to get a sense of what we like and what we're likely to respond to, and then they're going to put ads up to try and elicit a response from us. And we can look at YouTube or obviously Facebook and Google. That's the main model that they work for. In the context of Kinzoo, what I'm talking about is, for instance, we're going to have stickers. There'll be a feature within Kinzoo down the road, and if we have stickers that are branded, coming from a branded partner, somebody with an established brand, that potentially could show up in Kinzoo. And to some, that might they might call that advertising, others might not. So it opens up this bit of a gray area, which is why I'm just careful about how I talk about advertising. What we're not going to do is, I think everybody's familiar with the Instagram or the Facebook feed. Every third post is an ad, and that ad is something that generally you're interested in because they kind of have this profile built up on you, and they understand kind of what you're likely to respond to. So that's a sort of thing that's definitely off the table. So ultimately, yes, it's up to us to really understand the advertising rules and be aware of them, but we're not going to really interact with them or hit them directly. I think that we end up in this kind of gray area where potentially we work with brands and there's some sort of brand presence on Kinzoo, but it's not going to be in the form of direct advertising.
Okay. This ties with another question, which is your business model is a subscription-based model. It's a one-time purchase. Is a free application because you will be having agreements for advertising, non-behavioral advertising. How will it work?
Sure. So our initial business model is going to be what's called a freemium model. It's a type of subscription model where basically Kinzoo is going to be free to use for families, and at some threshold there'll be a subscription element to it where parents will pay a fee, and that's going to unlock additional features or things that they're interested in. And where we are at currently with that is we've been working on the foundation of Kinzoo, which is really the core messenger, all of the safety features, all of the workflows that keep things private and secure. And we've built that. And now what we're doing is we're actually currently this week, we're surveying parents to get a better understanding of, I kind of touched on this earlier, but what are the things that they want us investing in? And what we're really trying to understand is how to create a value proposition that would enroll parents and have them willing to pay something for Kinzoo. So the base messenger, people are going to be able to, exchange messages and videos and photos, audio messages with friends and family. That's always going to be a free service. And what we're trying to do is find ways to put additional services behind some sort of subscription paywall. And we're pretty early on in that process. We have a lot of ideas on things that we might do. But for instance, we touched on video calling earlier. Like maybe that is an example of a feature that we would, put behind a paywall if there's enough demand. But we're early on. We don't know enough yet to make any commitments. That one just comes to mind because it's come up a number of times. But that's going to be the primary the primary business model underpinning Kinzoo. And then we're also trying to look at other things that are going to align with the values of the brand, which again, we make decisions versus parents, and certain things are off the table, other things that we just have more work to do in understanding what we feel good about and what things that we won't want to pursue.
Okay. One of the things I partnered with YouTube to create a channel for the YouTube Kids app. And one of the things that I realized is that YouTube is an application that kids start using before they learn how to read and write. 3-year-olds are already using YouTube. And what happens is when they are already using that app, it's very difficult for them to transition into a YouTube Kids app because they are already used to that to the regular YouTube application. What happens is even if they join YouTube and start using YouTube Kids, there is some limit on the livelihood of the application because once they reach 8, 9, 10, they don't want to be kids, they want to be teenagers, you know. And
Mhm.
then there is a colleague in school that already uses the regular YouTube app, and I'm using the YouTube Kids app. So that's an obstacle for applications that are developed targeting kids. And when I saw that you work and are thinking of an audience that starts at 6, I was wondering whether you're not starting already somewhat late. And because you already have kids talking to their grandparents through Skype and FaceTime when they are 3 years old. And the other is how do you plan to expand the livelihood of the application? So it's a two question basically.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll talk about the age. So um, yeah, we put 6 plus is what our website says. I would say that Kinzoo is optimized for 6 plus, not really restricted. So children younger, and we already have a number of people testing the app with children that are younger than 6, and it works well. But just in terms of kind of the feature set and what we're building, I would say it's kind of optimized for 6 plus.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny that given the example of YouTube Kids versus YouTube is, if I've been driving around a Ferrari for a number of years, it's hard to go back to, Honda Civic, right? And I think that's gonna. So I think the thing with YouTube Kids is most kids have already had a lot of exposure to YouTube. And when you put them on the kids version, it's a very scaled down version, and it feels very young. The other interesting thing with kids is you touched on this as well. By the time they're 8 years old, they don't think they're kids anymore. I think that they consider themselves, young adults, or at least if my daughter's any indications. So when we designed Kinzoo, we optimized it for we built an application that was kind of optimized for what we thought kind of 8 plus, and really like getting into like 10 plus would like. And so we're not too bright and use a lot of kid-like imagery and things like that. What Kinzoo is a carefully designed platform we knew we had to build a world-class user experience, and we built one. There's a lot of detail that went into the design. So for instance, we use big icons. We don't use a lot of text because it's kids, but we deal with small hands, right? So bigger icons.
Mm-hmm.
We don't use a lot of text, but what we're trying to deliver is a polished and a clean user experience and user interface that's going to appeal to kids that are getting older and don't necessarily want to be on something with bright colors and a lot of cartoon characters and things like that. So we want to deliver something that's kind of a grown-up feel to it, and then hopefully that's going to attract some of the kids that are aging up. Mm-hmm. And in terms of longevity, I think that where we don't want to find ourselves is in direct competition with things like Snapchat or Instagram. And with that in mind, I mean, we're not focused much on the 13 plus type of segment right now. I do think there are a number of things happening at a macro level that are interesting, and I think that could open up opportunities for us to potentially have people on the platform longer, especially the kids. And WhatsApp is owned by Facebook. WhatsApp is about to introduce advertising. There's a bit of a white space in the messenger market, and also I see an opportunity that with Kinzoo being family centric, we could be the messenger because family lives on beyond 12 years old, 13 years old, right? Okay. So we could be a place that's where families get together, and I think that's really interesting. We designed the product so that potentially down the road we could serve up different types of user experiences based on age. So maybe a 4-year-old sees something different than a 12-year-old sees. Those are all things that we've kind of built into the foundation. Those are directions that we could go. But realistically, the gap that we see in the market is kind of this, 6 to 12, where kids are getting onto technology that's connected. And we want to empower them to have a tool set that's going to allow them to do some things, explore, be creative, with the people that they love and in an environment that's built around privacy and safety.
Okay. Abilio Carvalho is also asking, in which languages is Kinzoo platform available? And in which system? Are you also developing for both Android and iOS, or just Android?
Yeah, so we're, as of right now, English only. Then beyond that, we're going to decide. There's a lot of attractive markets, and also Kinzoo being a platform that connects extended families. There's no doubt that we're going to get interest internationally. So as of right now, I would say it's just a little bit too early. We haven't decided what markets might be next, and then obviously that's going to steer additional languages that we would look at. And then in terms of developing the platform, yes, we're going to be on both iOS and Android, and of course that's a very important thing, because if we were iOS only, all it takes is one person in the family with an Android device, and then it doesn't quite work. So we're currently testing the iOS version. Android is going to be ready. We're going to have an early access program available as early as next week, and then Android is going to be kind of feature complete for the MVP by about the end of the year, even though we'll still be in early access program then.
Okay, you were mentioning competitors and features. Where does TikTok come into the picture for you, if it does?
Yeah, so TikTok is another platform that's it's for 13 plus. TikTok it's an interesting platform. It's a lot of fun. It wants a lot of creativity, right? So I watch a lot of videos that are shared on YouTube and Twitter and all these places of mostly teenagers doing very creative things and actually making some videos that are quite astonishing how well done a lot of those videos
I would
are.
imagine your daughter in her age bracket, if she doesn't use it, she would love to.
I would think so. What's interesting, and this is primarily what I read about in the book, is so the underlying kind of features and what kids actually do on TikTok, it looks like a lot of fun, and it actually promotes some of the things that we like, right, around creativity, and you're creating things to share, and it's kind of bringing friends together and things like that. Where TikTok now, when I say things like that, we have to remember that we're probably talking about 5 to 10% of the videos that are on TikTok. There's still 90 to 95% that aren't very good, that are maybe racy, that are inappropriate for kids. So that's the other thing that we can't forget. And so in addition to kind of the obvious stuff, I checked out TikTok with my daughter, and one of the first videos that I saw was, I think, a teenage girl. She was dressed, pretty provocatively and doing some dance moves and things like that. So it was a non-starter for my daughter. No, you can't be on this. But the other thing that TikTok does, and this is really the core of my book, is it introduces this idea of social validation and comparison. And what it starts to introduce is this culture of likes and followers. And what we're seeing and what I talk about in the book is what I argue has been happening is it's now created this environment, really competitive environment on these platforms where kids are starting to measure themselves in likes and in followers and these kind of metrics. So that's really concerning to me. And what we see is, now this is US stats, but there have been recent increases in things like anxiety, depression, and suicides in the US. And a lot of people are quick to blame, social media proper or screen time, because, they kind of say, well, those rates have gone up in the past 5 years, so has the amount of time that people are on social platforms, so they must be related. I've looked at a number of studies. It's far from conclusive. I would say it's far too early to assign any cause and effect. But what I talk about in the book is my main concern with all of that is it is very real, this kind of competitive culture, and we're seeing a lot of behaviors in kids and youth on platforms like Instagram. They're deleting a lot of posts because they don't get enough likes, we see the growth in stories, and I argue that part of that is because it's less competitive and less pressure to get results on it. So there's a lot of things happening out there that are really highlight, I think, this risk of propelling even teenagers. I would argue putting teenagers in that kind of environment could be dangerous, but what I feel even more certain about is that's not a good environment for children as we're getting to 7, 8, 9, whatever it might be. And in the book, I cite a study that was done in the UK, and they tested some of this. And what they found is in a very short period of time, when kids were introduced to this platform that had likes and followers, that they almost immediately started curating content and actually taking pictures and posting things that they thought that were going to get the most likes as opposed to what they were. So they started kind of moving into this highly curated world really quickly and really naturally. So that's all a big concern for me. That's something that TikTok, among these other platforms, introduces. So again, we talk about get the best of technology and kind of strip away the worst. And I think there's an opportunity, and we're thinking hard about, could we serve up experiences that are going to kind of capture some of the creative elements of platforms like TikTok and Snapchat, but deliver them in a way that strips away kind of the social validation, the comparison, the competitiveness of this like-based culture, and make it more about just having fun, being creative, and sharing with family.
Okay, so I would imagine that you have been following all the research and investigation, also the Senate committee hearings in the US regarding the dark patterns that some of the industry has been adopting in what I call the attention economy in order to gain money from our attention by putting us glued to the screens. And an interesting thing that I'm seeing is the industry itself is now starting to develop features and to include features on their devices are destined to promote well-being. Features like, for instance, Instagram hiding the number of likes, YouTube allowing you to see how many hours have you watched videos. Do you have any features planned in the well-being arena, since you have obviously been researching about it?
Yeah, I have, and we think a lot about this. So there's a little bit to kind of unpack in that question. So I'll start by saying my first belief is not all screen time is the same, and that's really what the book is about. So if, for instance, my daughter was on Instagram and she was curating photos and chasing likes, that's very different than FaceTiming with her grandma, talking about what she's been up to at school and things like that. So if we start there, that's really what I talk about in the book. Is I think that just focusing on time, the time that children are on screens, isn't quite the right thing to do anymore. It's far more important what they're doing on those screens. And with most things in life, quality is much more important than quantity. And that's really what I get into with the book. The other aspect that I talk about that you touched on is part of my background is I'm a CFA charter holder. So I'm a chartered financial analyst, and I spent a number of years doing financial analysis in a company. And what I think that means in the context of this is I take a very practical approach, and I ask, you talked about dark patterns, we talked about lights, and we talked about some of the things that platforms do. And I openly question why they do it. And is usually the case, it's boils down to money and building value in the company. So in the book, I talk a lot about—
and backfire in the future, because people are becoming aware that we're all being manipulated.
Yeah, 100%. So when I talk about it, really what I get to is there's incredible motivation for big platforms to do things that are going to get us onto their platform keep us on their platform as long as possible. And eventually they want to learn about us and they want to put ads in front of us that are going to have us click or maximize the chances that we're going to click. Because at the end of the day, the platforms work for the advertisers. Virtually all of their revenue comes from advertising, and they're very good ad platforms, right? They're actually amazing ad platforms, but built on these these profiles of data that they have on all of us. So with that question, Instagram is hiding likes, which is actually a positive development, I argue. And I also argue that the reason that they're doing that publicly, they're kind of saying, hey, we're worried about mental health. We don't want to make Instagram such a competition. But when they actually introduced that feature, what they cited was what was happening is a lot of people, and especially young people, were deleting a lot of posts because they weren't getting enough likes. So what happens is then you have less content being posted onto a platform. And if there's less content, I'm, as a user, probably less likely to go on as often. And so that becomes a real issue for them. And what I argue, and I make this point in the book and also some blog articles that I've done, is that their response is actually due to declines in user-generated content. And maybe, the output of I think it is better for mental health, but I don't think that that's why they're doing it necessarily. I think that they're doing it because users have forced that change. And it's actually, there's a lot of reason for optimism because young users of the platforms especially have rejected a lot of the things that are data capture, that are kind of social validation. And now the networks are having to adjust, and hiding like counts is one way that they're doing that. And net, I think that that's a positive. So the final part of the question is, you asked about screen time tools and things like that. We're still trying to kind of understand, because iOS and Android are both coming out with a lot of features themselves. And what we're trying to do is get a better understanding of whether parents feel that those tools are sufficient, or they're looking to platforms like us to build better tools on top of that. So as of right now, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel, we're watching, the Apple screen time reports and things like that are good tools. We're trying to understand how much parents are using those and if they want us to build things on top of that or not. So that's kind of where we're at with that. But like everything, we're going to engage with communities of parents and find out how much they value these things, and continue to make good investments that parents are going to love.
Okay. Well, Sean, we reached the hour. You had prepared a few slides. We didn't look at any of them. And I was wondering if there is any slide that you would like really to show, because for some reason that you find it would be important to, and that we haven't touched.
No, I don't think so. I think that we covered the main concepts pretty well. I think I wasn't sure if we were going to, the presentation would augment what we're doing, but no, I don't think there's anything specific I need to show. I think we had a very good discussion and covered most of the main points already.
Yeah, it was great speaking to you. One final question is, since I'm based in Portugal and many of our followers are either from Portugal or from Brazil, some of them also from other countries, but especially from Portugal and Brazil, it's where my main audience is. If they want to try the platform, is there a pilot going on that they can subscribe to join that pilot? Is it possible? And if yes, what do they need to do?
So the best thing for them to do would be to go to our website, Kinzoo.com. And in the upper right corner and various parts of the site, there's an early access button. And if they click that button, there's a short survey that they can complete. And in completing that survey, they'll get onto our waiting list, for lack of a better term. And from there, we'll be in touch. So Kinzoo will be available in a test environment, potentially in areas outside our core markets, but we have to handle things on kind of an individual basis.
Sure.
With that being said, we actually have two people from Brazil that work with us here in Vancouver, but they've got a lot of family in Brazil. So we're definitely getting a lot of pressure to get into the Brazilian market, into Portuguese speaking environments. So without making any promises, it's high on our list, and we have a lot of people that would be very interested in using Kinzoo soon. And so that's kind of where we're at. But the best thing to do would be get on our website, pass along your email, and then we will definitely be in touch and talk next steps.
Okay, I think there's still one question coming up. Yes, Billy Carvalho is asking. Oh no, it's a comment saying, as always, another live where we got excellent information. So compliments are to you, Sean, because it was thanks to you. If anyone has any final questions, please feel free to ask them, and I'll put them on the screen. Meanwhile, Sean can be followed, and you can find him on LinkedIn, and also on Twitter. I'll be publishing these links after the live, both on Facebook and on YouTube. Kinzoo has also a page on LinkedIn that you can follow. You can also go to the website and try to apply to the pilot that will be taking place. You can also follow Kinzoo on Twitter and on Facebook and on Instagram. If you want to read Sean's book, Screen Captured, it's available from this website. You go to the website, there's information on the book, and from there you'll find links to Amazon, and I think to other places where you can purchase the book. This said, there are no final questions. Sean, just thank you very much. It was a pleasure to have you on the show and to learn about Kinzoo, and wish you all the best, and that your app becomes a success. And keep in touch. Let us know how things go on. And don't forget the Portuguese-speaking market, because in Brazil there are over 200 million. It's quite a few, and Portuguese is the 6th most spoken language in the world. So it's and with very few changes, very much like Portuguese, like English, American English, and British English. There aren't that many differences. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to have you, and I wish you all the best. Thanks to all of those that have been following us. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel, and also follow us on our Facebook page. Sean, thank you. See you soon.
Thanks, Tito. You as well. Thanks for having me.
Bye.
Bye.